everybody. Welcome to the Nexus Ag Update. I'm Brady.
And I'm Chad.
And today we've got some of our TruTerra friends with us and Megan. Megan's been on the podcast before, hasn't she?
She's one of our returning champions. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Third time.
Third time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm not paying attention because I didn't know it was 3 times already.
Yeah, well, she's up there as one of them that's been on here a few times. So
returning champion.
Returning champion.
I was wondering what you meant by returning champion on here. I was wondering what she won.
Well, I mean, she won because she's here today with us.
She won the chance to be on the podcast.
Yes.
Sweet.
What an honor.
It is an honor.
Megan, if you just want to reintroduce yourself, and then you probably know Joel the best. If you want to give Joel his little introduction.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Megan Solland, conservation agronomist for Nexus. Been with the company for 3 years now, starting as an intern down in Stacyville, and then kind of just bopping all over Stacyville, Adams, now located in Northwood. So that's where my office is at. Working with farmers, trying to promote sustainability practices, converting from conventional practices to things like strip till and no-till, and then other programs associated. And then with us today, we have Joel. He is with TruTerra.
Yeah, so TruTerra is a division of Land O'Lakes, and we play matchmaker between food, feed, fiber, and fuel companies that want to take credit or offset their emissions from a carbon perspective, in some cases maybe even water. And we play matchmaker between them and farmers and retailers that have the ability to make those practice changes and then supply the data that we use to make calculations to be able to supply those companies and meet their goals. Mm-hmm. I've been with Land O'Lakes for 14 years, predominantly in the agronomy side, what some may recognize as Winfield United. I've worked on a number of things, satellite imagery, crop modeling, building retail websites and those pieces. So I'm a little bit recovering IT, but I actually started out as an agronomist.
Well, and that's kind of where a lot of us, ran past on, like the old Art of 7 program and stuff like that. I mean, you were kind of leading that for a bit. And then how many years have you been with TruTerra then?
I've been with TruTerra for a year.
Okay.
And but I started out as an ag retail agronomist, just like you guys. Actually, just a little north of here.
Yeah,
in Rochester.
You were up by towards Rochester for back in the day. So
yep. So in TruTerra, again, we talk about playing matchmaker. My role there is both leading the sales team and going and talking to these food companies, what we call consumer products goods, or if I abbreviate to CPGs. I talk with those companies. I work a lot with ag retailers to be able to develop the supply, and those CPGs to be able to develop the demand, and then play matchmaker between the two. Recently, I also have taken on some of the what you guys might call research and development teams that design the methodologies and actually bring the programs to market. So I'm getting a little bit further into the technical pieces as TruTerra moves forward.
Okay,
awesome.
Well, and that's part of the reason why we wanted to bring you in on this one here. Megan and I, what was that, in February, we went to the TruTerra conference.
Yep.
And obviously we all know that we're there. The big topic was carbon intensity scoring. And that's really been a big topic here.
It's made its way north.
It's made its way north.
Big time.
Big time. It's been a hot topic this winter, or not this winter, this summer.
I was about to say it's even been a hot topic. It feels like this last couple of weeks, and,
yes.
and people getting application records and things like that.
Yeah, because I mean, guys are getting close to starting a new season. So if they're going to be making any changes, they need to start thinking about that. So let's kind of go into that a little bit of what that actually is. And if you want to kind of explain that, maybe make sure it's not like the 50,000 or 100,000 foot view.
Yeah.
Bring it down.
Bring it down
to me level.
Bring it to Brady's level.
Yeah. Well, certainly farmers have had a lot of interest in this. It's been in a lot of farm magazines and things like that, but maybe just taking a step back and taking a look at, what do you guys think it takes to be successful in the next 15 years of farming? What are the 2 or 3 things you think you're going to have to get right?
Well, I mean, obviously the profitability is part of it.
Okay.
And And I guess sustainability, I think, is going to be a key part of it because our consumer that we're selling the products to are asking for it.
Yeah. There's a huge market for it.
Yeah.
So the right agronomic things, the right economic things, and you added that third piece, sustainability, the right environmental things.
Yep.
Some ways I think about TruTerra and the opportunity here as an offensive place where you can go out and create a new market and you can earn some income by being able to do some of these right things, license the data, and then allow, that licensed data to fund some new things on your farm. Some of these are actually defensive situations, and you might not necessarily see these, but there's some examples of markets going away because the U.S. isn't the preferred supplier. Now, the U.S. does export a little bit of whole kernel, corn or soybeans, but a lot of times we're processing in the U.S. and we're exporting meal or some version of a byproduct from the ethanol process like DDGs, and we're exporting those as feedstocks to other countries. When you look at the global market, if Brazil can have a lower carbon intensity to produce their crop than the US, the market will go there and you won't even know that it's gone. So there's both an offensive play here, that creating a new market and getting paid for that. And there's also a defensive play here as well. So your question of, well, what is carbon intensity? It's a measurement that has, both a numerator and a denominator. So on the top, the number is grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule of energy. So there's a test later on for this.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes.
You got that written down, right?
I do.
Okay.
Megajoules.
Megajoules.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to fail.
So how much CO2 is produced per unit of energy produced? That's the factor. Now, when we talk about licensing data to build a greenhouse gas calculation, the CO2 equivalent means several greenhouse gases that are produced in there, including nitrous oxide, which would come off from urea application as it gases off. What do you guys use to prevent urea from gassing off?
Urease inhibitor.
They're urease inhibitors. What do you do from preventing nitrates from moving off target?
Oh, we put on a stabilizer of some sort, yeah, DCD or nitropyrin.
And those are the right agronomic, economic, and environmental things.
Correct.
So licensing that data, when you say, I did apply a stabilizer, I did it on this date with this much nitrogen, that's the stuff that goes into the calculations to help form these calculations around carbon intensity. The carbon intensity in the food space is known as an emissions factor. The carbon intensity in the biofuel space typically refers back to something that the Department of Energy calls the GREET model. A GREET actually is an acronym. It's capital letters. It stands for something. I can look it up.
There's like 6 of them.
Yeah. There's variations of them, different years of the model, but really GREET is what I would consider a level 1 model. It's looking up the book value on certain practices and certain things that you're doing. And then it makes a calculation towards how much carbon was created per unit of energy produced. So that's what a CI score is. Now, why is that relevant today? Well, because as part of the drive for this administration to produce sustainable aviation fuel and continue the next evolution of biofuels, they've started to put tax incentives or proposed tax incentives in place. The Inflationary Reduction Act, way back, 7 years ago, the Inflationary Reduction Act, trying to get the economy restarted, they put a whole bunch of money into that. So the debate over, whether or not the money should be spent or not, that happened 7 years ago. And it wasn't a bipartisan supported issue then. It was supported predominantly by one party. And now that the money's been approved, this is actually a bipartisan piece where the money getting approved and getting out to farmers is actually the next task. And so that's where this tax incentive, which some people might recognize is called 45Z, or maybe you've heard of 40B. It's a catchy name, right? Lots of marketing behind it. It's actually a section of the tax code. That's just like you're reading a legal contract in 3.1, 45Z is a section of the tax code that refers to a tax incentive starting in 2025 that farmers who can submit data on their farming practices can help their ethanol plant or their biofuels plant. I say oftentimes when we think of biofuels, we think of ethanol. but soybean crush actually
Yeah.
goes into renewable diesel.
And that's becoming a bigger concept too. I mean, look at all the crush plants that have been firing up here in the last 18 months, 24 months.
Yeah, I always think that, that like the crush plants is actually probably the bigger opportunity on sustainable aviation fuel. You can turn soybeans into biodiesel, or you can refine them one more step, what they call degumming, and you can turn that into fuel for airplanes. And again, the administration's big push was being able to decarbonize the airline industry and produce sustainable aviation fuel. There's only one place in the US today that produces sustainable aviation fuel using ethanol. Anybody know where it is?
Isn't it in Illinois or something?
It's
in California.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's one in Atlanta called LanzaJet.
Okay.
And the ethanol that they're using is actually Brazilian ethanol
Oh, yeah.
made from sugarcane.
Sugarcane.
Now, sugarcane plants are pretty much off the grid, not because they want to be, but because they kind of have to be. And so they actually use some of the stover, what I would call stover, left over from the sugarcane plants to fuel those factories, to heat those things, to ferment to ferment that into ethanol and make the alcohol, and then they bring that to the U.S. And then LanzaJet goes through one more step to essentially distill it down another step and turn it into sustainable aviation fuel. So that's the only example right now in the U.S. where the 40B tax code, which is actually what they released guidelines on, has been put forth. And they released some guidelines that said you can bundle up these practices. And so if you're doing cover crop, no-till, and a nitrogen stabilizer, you can qualify in 2024 for a tax credit as long as you're contracting directly with the fuel supplier.
An ethanol plant.
In this case, a sustainable aviation fuel plant.
Okay.
Do you guys know of any farmers that contract directly with Phillips 66?
No.
Like, they don't sell their grain to Phillips 66.
No.
Right. So,
Yeah.
like, this regulation didn't quite make sense. And it was a little bit of a weather balloon. They're testing out the waters for how people would react to it. As much as, you think that your farm, located here in Northeast Iowa, that people want you to convert to cover crops and no-till, there's also a whole side in Washington of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, environmentalist groups that don't want ethanol anywhere near the fuel space. They don't want corn going into ethanol because it puts pressure on food prices. And if you're a European company or a European country, you think about food versus fuel,
Mm-hmm.
food versus fuel. And so, like, there's actually a pressure in Washington. Like, the tension here is whether or not corn or soybeans should be used or should be considered sustainable aviation fuel or sustainable. And in order to be considered sustainable, they would have to be 50% less carbon intensive than petroleum. So that's kind of the magic number they're getting. But that's the tension in Washington right now is the NGOs, the environmentalist groups, they really don't want crops to be turned into fuel. And so they're pushing on that in unique ways that kind of make it maybe harder to qualify, that are trying to push in models and methodologies that don't allow corn to be considered sustainable when they do the math on that. And that's where USDA Secretary Vilsack has really done a nice job in Washington of trying to push the farming community forward and to be able to use these commodities in the global market, in the US market, for sustainable aviation fuels.
Well, and I think sometimes we need this because you go look at, you said that like 5-10 minutes ago, the amount of grain that actually gets exported at this point, it's pretty low. So it's like, we got to find a market for some of these crops to turn them into something at a little higher value or something. And that's where this does kind of come in.
Yeah. So is this a defensive play or is this an offensive play? Are we going to create a market because of CI score? Or is this about making sure that U.S. ethanol, biodiesel, and sustainable aviation fuel has an opportunity to play as a low carbon fuel standard in the global market?
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what's pushing a lot of this is that, and that you're talking about that weather balloon thing. I mean, that's been like the talk all winter since we've kind of been back. It's like, well, when are we going to see the clarification? Well, it might be this week. Well, and another month and another month and another month.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been heck for you to get that.
Well, and the real challenge is knowing where to deploy your capital. Okay,
Right.
so we don't know. So kind of the governing bodies in Washington here that are involved. There's the USDA, who has put out some climate smart practices. We'll talk a little bit about those in TruTerra programs. There is the Department of Energy, who has said, this is how you would build a life cycle analysis. This is how you would quantify and draw a box around what should be considered in producing a corn crop, what should be considered outside of producing a corn crop for carbon intensity. There's the U.S. trade representatives, because at some point you've got to get rid of the corn that we produced here. And then there's the IRS. And so Janet Yellen, head of the IRS, this actually is a tax program. I don't know how many cornfields Janet Yellen has walked, but it's probably not tons, right? So her guide in all of this is Secretary Vilsack, who's trying to help bring the farming community closer to how a tax code gets implemented. And the tax code is meant to be implemented by fuel producers. And in the case of ethanol, if you're using sustainable aviation fuel, the ethanol plant is not actually the fuel producer. It's actually companies like Chevron and Phillips 66, and it's actually the big oil companies. So for the first time we took a swing at ethanol in the US, ethanol was a boom for rural economies, and big oil was probably against it because it took out of their bucket. But now oil and ag are actually on a similar side of the table lobbying for this, because Phillips 66 would actually be the refiner to make sustainable aviation fuel. So the tax credit would go to them, and then they've got to be able to move that tax credit down to the company that supplied them soybean oil or ethanol. And then that company has to be able to move that money down to the farmer that impacted that. The big change here is most of the time these ethanol plants, they do a carbon assessment inside of their four walls of how much energy comes in, how is the electricity produced, how much carbon is recaptured. And those ethanol plants within their four walls have been doing that quantification for some time here. What you might recognize as the California low carbon fuel standards market, where they're sending fuel west with that marking on it or with that data on it. But that's really been how carbon intensive is that plant, or how efficient is that plant. Not all the plants run at the same efficiency. Not all of them are as good at getting all that corn turned into sugar, turned into ethanol.
I don't know if you can answer this question, or maybe Joel. How I know you kind of had mentioned a little bit how us as farmers and the people we work with can make money on this. What is the first kind of steps on going about something like this? Like, what is, as a local grower,
on the farmer level? Well, we're seeing some ethanol plants starting to implement like conservation. If you can prove that you're doing a cover or reduced till or something, they're giving a little bit of a kickback at that point, but they're not getting anything really for that other than maybe lowering their intensity there. That's not part of this program from what I've heard or what I've seen. Is that kind of correct?
So that's a separate grant. I know the couple that I am aware of.
There's a couple around this area here that are doing that.
So that ethanol plant was awarded a Climate Smart grant, just like similar to a TruTerra Climate Smart program as well. It's kind of set up like that. It's actually down to the practice, not your actual CI score. So it is a little bit different, but still money from that Climate Smart grant.
Because they're probably getting like 5 or 10 cents additional to what the board price is if they're doing something that way, or depends on where they're at, I guess. But
yeah, some of them are doing it that way, and then some of them are actually you get paid for practice change.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, so you get a couple dollars an acre for adding a cover crop, for example.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So they're making a lot of assumptions at that point. That's not like putting it through a model or anything like that. And I think that's where a lot of these programs kind of start. It's like, okay, you got to get a guy to kind of start it, and then if you want a little bit more, this is how we got to do it.
Yeah, the ethanol plant that applied for that USDA grant was actually pretty innovative, seeing around the corner and saying, well, we're not going to pay farmers out of the margins that we make on ethanol. we're actually going to use this grant to help get them interested in cover crops and get them interested in no-till, strip-till. And we always talk about those as those are the common practices that have the biggest impact on sequestering carbon.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're actually fairly innovative on that. That's USDA money. Certainly your NRCS office has money for farmers to do that. But I think the USDA is trying to get this Inflationary Reduction Act money out in some new and innovative ways, and not just always having to go through the NRCS office to do it. So that's good money to take advantage of. Now, in the other plants, the other market that exists is the Canadian market or the California market for low carbon fuel standards, or LCFS. And there might be a little bit of a premium that those ethanol plants get by opening up that market because they're able to collect some data and qualify what's referred to as the feedstock, which I'm an old dairy farm guy. So when we say feedstock,
I always think of silage or something.
Yeah. What's actually happening is, as I said before, the ethanol plants had a carbon intensity score within their four walls. The new tax guidance is aiming to allow the way that the farmer produces their corn or soybeans to be considered inside of that life cycle assessment. So they're broadening that out, because before the ethanol plants or the crush facilities couldn't really consider the farming practices inside of their carbon footprint. So that's why this is new. That's why this next evolution is asking for more specific data.
So in theory, let's say you had two ethanol plants. One is definitely a little more, put together, more efficient. They would just probably have a better CI score from the beginning, versus maybe one that doesn't. That one that doesn't might actually be in an area that could maybe qualify for one of those markets, but they can't because of the way the facility is built.
Sure.
And let's say they like half or three quarters of their corn's coming in low CI, they actually could maybe even qualify for that marketplace. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is why, I know farmers are probably really good at calling their ethanol plant and saying, hey, I know you're going to get $1 out of this. Why don't you just give me 75 cents of that and we'll call it even. But the ethanol plants don't know what they'll qualify. The rules aren't spelled out yet. There's speculation in the rules. But there's not clear rules for the ethanol plants for how they engage. There was the last request, the last update was that if you're going to try and qualify for a low, for taking the 45Z tax credit, you need to put in an application to the IRS. So I don't know that it's public record right now of which ethanol plants did or didn't, but you could have two ethanol plants, driveways right across from each other. And in order for them to qualify for this credit, they need to get below 51 megajoules of energy, 51 grams of CO2 per megajoule of energy, right? You go, well, what are they at today? I have no idea. They might know the answer to that, but they might be sitting at 65 grams of CO2 produced per each unit of energy, megajoule of energy that's produced at their plant. So what if we give them a CI score of that reduces it by 10 points? Okay. So this is like golf scores, low scores win.
Yep.
Well, they can't, if they're already at 65, they can't get below 51. So they're not even going to qualify for that. So they've got to be able to get below 51. And the feedstock, the corn or soybeans coming in, helps them get below that 51 if they can get it low enough. Now, from a corn perspective, the US number is 29.1 grams of CO2 per megajoule of energy. So that's the baseline that they're assuming the entire US corn crop starts from. Okay. If you do no-till, if you do cover crop, if you do, some of those practices, you might be able to get that down 10 points, maybe 15 points, maybe 30 points. But even what Janet Yellen and the IRS has said is they haven't given you clear pathways to be able to know how much will be available. So the calculation method of, I could do the calculation, Megan can do the calculation. We're going to come up with different numbers until the IRS comes out and brings clarity to that. Megan might come out here and say, well, you could get -10 for CI. Wouldn't that be nice? And you'll get, you'll get $2 an acre, or $2 a bushel for doing that. And I'm back here doing my calculation more conservatively. And I'm saying, I think you could get 15 cents a bushel. So that speculation in there, the last round that they came out and clarified on 40B for 2024 they said you can do this bundle. And they said for corn, you can earn 10 points. For beans, you can earn 5 points. Well, those 10 points aren't actually even equivalent to what you would have gotten if you would have ran that through the GREET model. And so it just doesn't do much right now. So it's kind of been this roller coaster of emotions of, am I going to get paid for doing this? Am I not going to get paid for doing this? And so I kind of, at that moment, I draw back to the bigger picture. One of the core things that I believe is that rainfall patterns in the corn and soybean growing regions of the U.S., the current climate pattern that we're in is higher rainfall amounts, fewer and farther between. So who in here has had a 2-inch rain in 45 minutes or an hour?
I think I've had like 3 of those this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And maybe some other areas to the west of us, like in our Western trade territory, probably in that 5-6
Anytime
range.
it rained, it was 2 inches.
Yeah, we have calls every day where, what's the next day looking like for work? And, oh yeah, we just had another 1/2 inch. What? Where?
Yeah.
Where? I mean, it was sunny all day here.
Yeah. Well, and the year always winds up being average.
Right.
So if you've taken it all now, how much of that water were you able to retain versus, did it come down, your soil sealed up and it ran off?
Yes.
I think one of the keys to farming in the next 15 years will be your ability to take on a 2-inch rain and then retain more of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will say this, going in from last year to this year, I'm not sure if you knew how bad weather-wise we were really dry in this area last year. And I think that our soil structure suffered immensely because of that. Because you go look in these fields, they are harder and stiffer and more compacted this year because of that. We just lost a lot of our good, our glue. We lost our organic glue to these soils because they just shattered last fall. Anybody that did tillage, and then shattered again this spring, and then all of a sudden it's just been pack and rain. So it was just terrible that way.
Yeah. So what are the soils that have survived the best?
I would say probably more of our sustainable practices at that point, guys that have done a little bit better job on minimal tillage and try to keep some of that high traffic tillage off that farm. Yeah. I think that was huge this year.
So I think that's the trend though, is the market may give you an offensive opportunity through low CI scores, which is going to come in the form of storing organic carbon. I don't know that tons of farmers out there go, please let me help. Can you store a little carbon for me? But most farmers respond to organic matter.
Yes.
And organic matter, is the thing that you can build that'll help release nutrients later in the season. It'll help build that soil structure and keep those PEDs together, which allows you to take on a higher rainfall event, fewer and farther between. And it helps you retain that water better when the rains kind of don't show up for a couple months. So I think that's the bet, whether you're looking at a tax subsidy from 45Z coming, how the rules get spelled out, what you're qualified for, or you're looking at a voluntary carbon market, like in TruTerra's business, where the food company wants to make an impact on their carbon footprint, and they want to pay farmers who have done those practices. I think the USDA's mission has always been conserve the national resource of soil. Recognizing that the U.S.'s ability to be a superpower revolves around its ability to be food secure.
Yep.
So food security is national security in the U.S. Topsoil is a key part of that. The USDA's primary responsibility is to conserve soil and build soil if they can. That's why they're constantly trying to move these monies back into your ability to build soil. Their other job in this is to manage supply, right? And the U.S. farmer continues to be more efficient. It continues to oversupply the market, and so they're always trying to find new uses and new places for that corn to go, which again is why we have this fuel opportunity ahead of us. So whether it's a government market, a tax market, or whether it's a commercial market in the food industry, those are offensive opportunities. There's some defensive opportunities here to align those right agronomic, economic, and environmental pieces, independent of whether or not your ethanol plant ever pays you for a low CI score.
So we've been talking a lot about data and different data you pick up. What kind of data is needed for a CI score or something like that?
Basically, it's every pass on your field. So we would need different fertilizer applications, yield coming off, and then dates as well. That's what a lot goes into the GREAT model. I know I've heard I've heard different scores, and like Joel said, it varies on what GREAT model they're using and who's actually doing the scoring. But I've heard a wide range, and it seems like guys that are using manure and then doing reduced till has seen a little bit higher scores. So that's been interesting. But
Just a trend you've been seeing.
Yep.
Yeah. Manure is considered a waste product. In the life cycle analysis, all of the carbon units associated with the production of a pig are actually allocated towards the pig
And not towards the waste.
and not towards the waste.
So do you think they'll ever look into that?
Well, that's one of the debates right now, is whether or not manure should be considered part of the practices that can be accounted for. Yeah, like I said, I've talked
Because
about
actually, that might actually help the score on the livestock side. Because I mean, you're going to kind of share that with the byproduct, right?
the way the math is done currently is that's all assigned to the pig.
Right. So you actually could have lower carbon intensity animal if they would actually put that into account on the manure side one.
If
right?
they would share it.
If they would share it.
When you do life cycle analysis, or LCAs, there's always a good abbreviation. The waste product is assigned to zero value.
Okay.
So let's talk about where in the US is there a waste product coming in at a zero carbon score?
Livestock. That's probably it.
Okay. What about used cooking oil? Anybody ever heard of UCO before?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the Chinese are sending a large amount of used cooking oil. And hopefully if you're watching this on video, you can see the used cooking oil in quotations. I'm not sure if you have to put one French fry in a fresh bucket of oil or two, but essentially what they're doing is they're taking some used cooking oil, which is a waste stream, and they're bringing it back to the US, calling it renewable biodiesel and having a low carbon footprint for that. And so that's ability to take a tax claim is based on it being called a waste product.
Okay.
Because all of the carbon intensity for that product is assigned to the creation of that French fry, not towards the waste product. So these life cycles analysis and how you do these carbon assessments, there's some things that don't make common sense in there. So certainly manure is a great nitrogen source. It's got some great micronutrients to it, a little bit of phosphorus, a little bit of potassium.
Right.
What about ammonia? So if you're going to you can use manure in substitute of ammonia. For every ton of ammonia produced, you produce about 1.5 tons to 2 tons of CO2 for energy to create that ton of ammonia. So that puts the farmer that's using ammonia, a commercial source of fertilizer, at a higher CI score than the farmer that's using manure, if they count manure in the analysis.
Unless we get to green ammonia or blue ammonia.
So what's green ammonia? What's blue ammonia?
Well, blue ammonia is what the electrical, right?
Yep. So it recaptures the carbon used.
And then green, they're using renewable electrical sources to create that.
Renewable energy from the get-go. Now, the ammonia is not blue. The ammonia is not green.
It's the same.
It's the same, right?
Yeah. It's just a designation, so we all feel good about it.
Yep. So the goal of that is to decarbonize the supply chain, and using that in the production of corn would allow that farmer to have a lower carbon emission or lower carbon footprint for that corn. So that's another example of, I don't know what the tax code is going to say. I'm not even sure the tax code is going to use GREAT, or if it's going to allow a second level model that allows a full process-based system to run, or if it's going to do this bundled approach. The bundled approach that they floated out there here earlier this year feels a little bit like how I do my taxes today. I can take my standard deduction, and that was the bundle, or I can itemize it and I can give you specific receipts of things that I've spent money on. And right now, what they've given you is an easy check the box bundled solution, a standard deduction. I'm hoping that they come back with being able to itemize it and talking about some of the data that Megan, suggested to collect. the challenge to that is, if we need to build a system to be able to handle that, maybe you've got to have photo evidence of the cover crop having happened. I don't know if that'll be the rule or not. Or do you need to have a receipt of the cover crop?
Or as applied from whoever you've had it applied to or whatever.
So one of the challenges, for a company like what we're facing is, imagine if I came to Nexus here and I said, you guys are great at building grain bins. You guys have them all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to build a grain bin. You'd say, well, great. What do you want me to store? Well, I don't know if it's going to be cotton, canola, or corn.
Oh my God.
Would you design that grain bin differently for those commodities?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Okay. Well, until the tax code comes out and they tell us exactly what the requirements are, I don't know what facility to build. I don't know whether I need to capture a photographic evidence of a cover crop having been planted, if it's a cover crop having been grown, or if I need to get the application records. We just don't know. So it's any CI scores that are on the market today are pure speculation of what the tax code might need.
Yeah, that bundle approach kind of worries me a little bit. I did not see that coming. So when they're saying that you have to be no-till and you have to be using cover crops, that definitely takes a lot of farmers out of the equation. And
especially both, because you might have some guys that are doing one or doing the, I think there's a lot of guys that are doing like no-till or reduced till, but it's like, well, especially in this climate, it's hard. Cover crops can be difficult sometimes. So, that takes a lot of guys out.
Right. And so there's different companies right now that are going around asking for farmers data so they can provide a CI score. And I would definitely be hesitant towards that just because of, just like you said, we don't really know how guidelines are going to turn out or what model we're using for sure and things like that. So I'd definitely be hesitant towards finding your CI score as of right now.
Yeah, you could have the lowest CI score in the county as a farmer on your fields.
But there's no mechanism to pay for that or to get paid for it.
Yeah,
right. What are you going to do with that CI score right now?
So if I was farming today, the best dollar spent in gathering information and data is still a soil sample. And then liming and making the adjustment there. The bets that I would make if I was going to invest in data on my farm today, I would invest in a soil sample, make your lime recommendation, make your fertilizer recommendation. And then if you want to take on some of these longer term bets, I would tell you right now, cover crop isn't the right answer for everybody. It doesn't fit well on every acre in the US. No till or strip till does not fit well on every acre in the US. And it's going to take you 5 years to figure that practice out, especially if, the fewer people in your community that have experience doing it, the harder it may be for you to adopt some of that. And so being able to have people in your community, being able to have conservation agronomist support, those are key pieces to help farmers learn and bring these things on. If the tax code got launched on January 1st, 2025, I don't think most people would be ready and in place to take advantage of it. And so it may be 5 years, and this 45Z tax credit is good till 2027. It may take you 3 years to scale up your cover crops. And so what bet are you making on this fall to experiment and kind of have a little bit of experience with that? When you guys see farmers adopt a new practice like that, do they take it on full farm?
No.
Go all 1,000
usually.
acres, push all the chips to the center? How do they do it?
No, it's usually a field or two. They'll test it out and they'll evaluate after 2 to 3 years. And by then they'll make their decision if it's going on all the acres or not. And sometimes it's just hit or miss. You might have the worst year possible to do that practice. Well, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. First year, you borrow the neighbor's drill.
Yep.
You plant into it. You're pretty nervous. It wasn't a complete disaster. Second year, you go, well, that wasn't crazy. I'll try it again on 2 farms. You borrow the neighbor's drill again, realize you probably need to buy a drill in order to do this at full scale. You plant into something green and you go, well, it made me nervous, but it wasn't a train wreck. And then the third year you buy a drill and you do it on more acres. And so the scale up for this as practice change happens doesn't match the timelines of the tax code, coming out.
Well, and as a I do a little farming too, but the way I look at it is like, if this isn't going to be around, potentially, we don't know how long this is going to be around. But let's say it just goes up to 2027. I'm not going to invest in anything at that moment to do something that it might not be or decent for me to do. Because if I'm not going to be able to take advantage of that tax code, margins are tight right now. Guys aren't going to be investing into a piece of equipment if they don't know if it's going to be worth it in 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah. So is it an offensive play or a defensive play?
Right.
Are you going to get an incentive to do this, or are you going to get locked out of market? I can tell you right now, in COVID, the Chinese government told their people, you're going to get through this by eating a dairy-rich diet. We're going to get our nutrition from dairy. So they added 500 1,000 cow dairies. They added 500,000 cows to China.
Wow.
Okay. Now I like milking cows as much as the next person, but that's a lot of cows.
That's a lot of cows.
The primary supplier for China was New Zealand dairies, which tend to be pasture-based systems, and tend to have a lower carbon footprint. When the market for the New Zealand dairy farmer dried up from China, that new low carbon milk supply hit the global market. And when you think of milk gets broken down. Certainly there's fluid milk that you drink. I work for Land O'Lakes. For every pound of butter you make about 1.5 pounds of non-fat dry milk powder. Now you make good margin on the butter, but you don't make good margin on the powder. The powders is a commodity business. And so that powders business, they're looking at the carbon footprint or the life cycle analysis of that, how efficient you can produce that powder. And the California dairy folks did not have the lowest carbon intensity. And this last year, the market shifted over to getting powders from New Zealand and not getting it from the West Coast in the US. So did the West Coast dairy farmer lose an opportunity? I'm not even sure that they know that the market is missing, other than maybe the milk price got impacted, supply and demand. They're not really sure, like, was it powders? Was it butter? Was it cheese? Was it fluid milk? What happened there? But that's an example of a market reorienting itself towards a low carbon supply chain. And it found that market in New Zealand as China added cows to supply their folks. So I tell that complex story here to bring it back to, guys, I don't know, like, should you buy a strip till rig? I think with our $250,000, like the irony that John Deere stopped making the moldboard plow 3 years ago and replaced it with the most expensive piece of equipment that you have to pull with the highest horsepower piece of equipment you can find.
Yep.
Like, the irony is too rich to not talk about that. But the bet here is that from a global market needing to both have high organic matter soil and the ability to store carbon and produce a low carbon commodity, that's the long-term look on the market. Even if the administration shifts around, these decisions may be made at the state level. The state of Minnesota is looking at low carbon fuel standards markets. And then the global market is going to continue to draw on places that they can supply low carbon fuel from or low carbon feed from. One thing that I see happening inside of these food companies is the food companies have a broker, somebody who's buying the grain, maybe from Nexus, maybe they're buying it direct from farm. And typically those people want a fast truck and a cheap price. Okay. Yep. You've all brokered grain before. One phenomenon that's happening is the sustainability teams and the broker teams are actually being put onto the same team run by the same person, so that the money for sustainability activities or regenerative ag activities is easier to access with that broker. Now that lasts a little bit for an offensive opportunity where they're going to pay you to do that. But at some point, when you work in supply chains, you're looking at a spreadsheet. Column F is how much it costs to buy the commodity, to buy the bushel. Column G is how carbon intense the commodity is. And column E is the sum of how much it would cost to replace that carbon intensity. And so what you might find as, hey, I can get $5 corn from this supplier. I can get $4 corn from this supplier. But the $5 corn has a lower carbon intensity score, and the cost for me to buy regenerative acres is higher. I'll actually buy the $5 corn with the lower carbon intensity score. So those are the trade-offs that supply chains are making globally. They're certainly making them on the national level right now. And I think that's, is this an offensive play or a defensive play?
So I was thinking of this. Obviously, yield's a big component of this. I kind of look at like last year with the weather we had, since we had kind of a poor crop. our carbon intensity for the 2023 crop must have been just off the charts versus even the year before where we had excellent. 2022 was an awesome year. I mean, heck, we could have probably had some pretty good low carbon scores on the 2022 crop because, I mean, it just comes down to how many pounds of fertilizer you went out there and how many bushels came off the field.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really rudimentary and basic of what we're talking about here. But
so in tomorrow's crop, should you put out all what's a good yield down here? And the first liar never wins here. So what's a good yield?
I like shooting for 220, 230.
220, 230. Okay.
I mean, it doesn't, I mean, we've had consecutive years where we've had that. And last year, not, but.
You guys all riding the combine out here?
Sometimes.
What's the highest, most realistic yield you've ever seen on the combine? And not when they jerked the hydrostat and they kind of flood the sensor, but like, what's the highest yield you've seen on that map?
260, 280.
I was about to say 280, 300 in some irrigated spots.
Yeah.
Last year.
I mean, I'm going with like sustained. I mean, not like one spot in the field.
Yeah, I'd say 270.
Yeah.
What'd they do right in that? How'd they get that 300, that 270? What'd they do right there?
Fertilize. They had control of the water and nothing but heat last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the emissions on that is going to be relatively low because yield, it's inputs per bushel of output is the formula here. So how efficient you were. If you're going for 300 bushels, should you put that all out, all the fertilizer, all the nutrients out there at once?
No. I would argue at 120 bushel potential, you shouldn't.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like when you play poker. You've got one card flopped up. Maybe you're the big blind. Well, let's see a couple extra cards here. You're pot committed. So you've got a little bit of investment out there in the tillage and the planting, but maybe figuring out how you can meter nutrients out and figure out how you can see a few more of the cards before you commit more chips to the pot is one of the strategies that you'd think about. I fully expect that when if carbon intensity is a common score across the industry in the next 10 years and carbon intensity from a food perspective or carbon intensity from a fuel perspective, if that's a common score, your emissions factor is going to flux up and down year to year, depending upon what you get. The better farmers are going to see the cards. They're going to see more cards before they commit more chips to the pot. So that's things like side dressing, fungicide applications. And there's a baseline of kill your weeds. There's no such thing as a good weed out here.
Right.
And I think that's some of the tools in the toolbox to continue to improve carbon intensity scores. Yields a primary driver of that.
Yeah. And I'm going to harken back to your old days as a retail guy. We use a lot more nitrogen later in the year than we ever have. I mean, a lot of these genetics now are built to do that. I mean, we've been hearing that for years on the cropland side. They figure 30 to 40% after tassel.
Yeah. How long have we been talking about responsive nitrogen scores?
Well, that's part of your 4R thing too. I mean, your 4R tenants, put it out there when it needs it.
Right.
Instead of once.
So in my days in Winfield United, we had these answer plots. One thing that was always fascinating about the answer plots, I forget what the number was. I want to say it was like, it was at least $500,000 to plant one of these things.
It's crazy. So Brady and I, we actually were on one of those crews.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you guys are expensive guys.
I know it.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, 90% of it's in the labor.
I was about to say, it didn't feel like it at the time, but the lot just to make your rounds and stop at your locations and your weeding and your tilling and your signing,
getting
and
the 4-row tractor implement out there.
Or getting your backpack sprayer on and getting your walk down and figured out. So
there's nothing like wearing a Tyvek on a hot day and you look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. You're just sweating your butt off out there. I'll tell you what,
though, taking it off on a hot day, taking that Tyvek suit off on a hot day, and there's a nice breeze coming through. It doesn't matter if it's a 90-degree day.
Ever.
It's the best breeze you've ever felt. As long as doesn't even matter if it's a hot breeze, it feels amazing.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's great. The interesting thing about the answer plots is, at its peak, there was, upwards of almost 200 of them across the country. Every year, 15 of those plots, when we do the difference between high nitrogen, the
unlimited,
what's suspected to be unlimited. It's really just a really high rate, or limited, which is we're trying to produce enough to produce an ear of corn so that we've got the ability to measure the delta or the difference between the two.
Yep.
Every year, there was 15 plots that got limited amounts of nitrogen that there was no yield difference between the limited nitrogen and the unlimited nitrogen. Well, that's cool. That means that at those 15 plots, that research wasn't able to be used because there was no delta. There was no difference to be able to show the difference between products. The challenge was every year, those 15 locations that didn't have a difference moved around.
Oh, yeah.
It was never the same location year over year. Late season mineralization of organic matter was the key driving factor. And
probably rainfall too.
And rainfall, right? So when you mineralize organic matter, you've got to have temperature, you've got to have moisture, and you've got to have organic matter to begin with.
Correct.
Right? So all of those factors drive late season nitrogen. So again, I go back to, if you're going to bet on the next 15 years, building organic matter and being able to mineralize nitrogen, the soil is going to be able to supply some of those extra chips to put in the pot late season as well, in addition to maybe your side dress and your stabilized practices.
And we've talked about that for years. I mean, that's where late spring nitrate tests come in and other testing methods. I mean, we've seen that. We've talked about that for years, where it's like, how do we get that mineralization thing figured out? And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Now, I think on the other side of that, if you've put more nitrogen out there than what the crop used, there's probably also a chance out there for you to put something from a cover crop standpoint out there to sequester that remaining nitrogen. And I don't know that the industry's there yet, but there's some sense in here. We do some basal stock nitrates to measure, did the corn plant run short? But there may be some need, in the future. I could see a day where you do some fall nitrate sampling and then determine whether or not you should put a cover crop in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And on the years where there's excess nitrates left over, putting a cover crop in to hold that into an organic form and then allowing that to mineralize late season for next year's crop.
Megan, do you want to go into some of our 2025 TruTerra programs that we have coming up?
Yeah, they're pretty exciting. So we got an early adopter program and a financial assistance program, both of which are starting enrollment on August 1st. So by the time this podcast is out, sign up. But the early adopter is if you have been doing no-till, strip-till, and or cover crops for 8+ years, we can get you $25 an acre on unlimited acres. It's just a 1-year contract, 1-year payment. A little bit of data collection is involved, and that would be through the TruTerra, TruTerra Early Adopter Program, which is funded by the Climate Smart Grant. And then the other one that TruTerra can offer us is also through Climate Smart, and that is the Financial Assistance Program. So that is for farmers who are trying to get into new sustainable practices. Again, it's those 3: no-till, strip-till, and or cover crops. But if it's an acre that hasn't seen any of those practices, we can offer $20 an acre for no-till, strip-till, and then $80 an acre for cover crop. Or if you want to try both of them at the same time, we can do $100 an acre. So
I kind of like the idea of you guys taking care of both getting guys to start is one thing, but there's a lot of guys out there that have been doing a lot of these practices, and those first few programs, it's like, well, you don't qualify. Sorry.
Yeah. This early adopter program is probably one of the only ones out there that really award long-term or early adopter farmers who have been doing these sustainable practices. And then also with that one, there's a little bit of free soil health testing. So it's kind of a trial with the Soil Health Institute. They'll actually be out on your field doing different soil health measurements. So that should be interesting. And that does get used through the Soil Health Institute, but it's only down to the county level. So it's nothing to do with the actual farmer or their farmer or field that will be published. But that should be some really interesting data as well, local data.
Because they had that last year, didn't I? Think you and I both did something like that last year, like a try before you buy thing or something that TruTerra had.
Yeah, that was a little bit different. That was TruTerra actually funded these different.
Okay, but that's through Climate Smart side. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about some of our other local programs we got? So like the Cedar River Cedar River watershed and our sustainable plot up north?
Yeah, so for our Iowans, our Iowa farmers, they can be in a RCPP, which is funded a lot through the city of Cedar Rapids. They're having some nitrate issues with the Cedar River, and so they're trying to go upstream, trying to figure out how we can reduce those nitrates in the Cedar River. And one way we can do that is doing sustainable practices on our acres. So they will help fund some of that cost sharing, some of these different practices. And that's a little bit more wide range for practices. So again, no-till, strip-till, cover crops. But there's also some opportunities for edge of field practices. So things like buffer strips, prairie strips, bioreactors. So lots of different opportunities out there as well.
So if somebody does something with the Cedar River watershed, can they qualify for some of the stuff on the TruTerra side as well?
So since they are both funded through the NRCS, technically, you cannot stack those ones.
Okay.
However, you could stack a carbon program with one or the other, the
Okay.
RCPP or the financial assistance program. So some things are still stackable, and that's what I'm here for as a resource to try to figure out what you can stack and what you can't. So
Okay.
And then our sustainable plot up in Lansing.
yeah, we found some really good data this year. I just talked to our Steve Lawler with the Mauer Soil and Water. He's been doing different nitrate sampling in the wells up there, and we actually have water in the wells this year.
Wow,
so
that's good.
Yeah, we're getting nitrate data. It's pretty exciting.
Well, was it about June last year it quit?
Yeah, everything was pretty dry up there. It's a
Yeah.
sandbox. So
Yeah.
yeah, we found some really interesting data. Hopefully we'll have some more. We'll actually be able to present it this year at our winter summit. It's kind of the goal. So.
Are you planning on doing another field day up there this year? I know it's soybeans this year, but I didn't know if you were planning on doing something up there again this year.
We don't have anything actually scheduled, but I would really like to do a cover crop demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
So sometime like September, which would be awesome.
But we do have a strip till field day. You want to talk about that? August 13th, 9:00, right?
Yep. Starts at 9:00. We're going to have 7 different implements there. So pretty excited about it. It's going to be located just northwest of Rose Creek, right on 56. Hopefully, you'll be able to see the 7 different implements out there. So,
and she's talking about like Joe Bob's Tractor Supply, right? And you're just, are you talking like John Deere? You're talking.
Oh yeah, we got some John Deere equipment. Made Montag. Yeah, there's tons.
Pretty much the who's who
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
soil
the big guys are going to be there.
The one that Joel was talking about earlier with the big tractor that you need to pull it with.
Yeah, we'll have a Gladiator, Soil Warrior. Yeah, should be fun. But yeah, it's from 9 to 2 on August 13th. We're going to be having Anna Cates from the University of Minnesota come down and give a little soil health presentation to start off the day. And then we'll have some farmer panelists. So we'll have some local guys asking questions, or I'll be asking questions, they'll be answering. About,
those are usually the better. You be asking
that's
the
usually
questions.
how it works.
That's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun.
Talking about strip tilling and other soil health practices that they're implementing on their farm, as well as different programs that they might be enrolled in. And then we'll have a free lunch, mostly sponsored by TruTerra. So thanks, Joel.
You're welcome.
And Kruger. We have to shout out Kruger.
Yeah, Matt couldn't be here today, and I'm a little disappointed.
Well, he did help me out on some things when it came to the outline and stuff. So I want to thank him for that.
Yeah.
But
I needed someone to match the energy this morning with Kruger, and he was going to bring the power, man.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you said lunch, parking. There's a little lot there. Otherwise, overflow will be in the park in Rose Creek.
Correct.
And we've got a shuttle service back and forth.
Yep.
Food provided, and you say it starts at 9. But if you can't be there right at 9, still show up.
Definitely.
I mean, we get there after 9. They're not going to have it all tilled up by then.
Right.
No.
Right. It's not like a hard cutoff, like 9:01.
No.
Good luck.
No.
Good luck.
No. Yeah. Yep.
we're gonna have some opportunities to talk to the different implementers and retailers and whatnot. I think from 9 to 10, we're gonna have just like a social hour looking at the different jobs.
Kind of like
that
an
the
open
structure-
house.
Yep.
Yeah, see how one compares to the other. 'Cause
Exactly.
I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that like Farm Progress, let's go see the combines go across there and start kicking around how it did.
Yeah, and the other big sponsor is Vote Custom Service. So they're going to be there with their implement, and should be a good day.
Awesome.
Can't wait.
So make sure everybody comes out. Make sure you get there early, get a parking spot, and we'll take care of you if you need a shuttle back and forth from the park. So August 13th, 9:00 in the morning. Be there. It's right outside Rose Creek. You said northwest? Yeah, northwest, right across on the other side of the bridge creek. There, you'll see it. There'll be a bunch of signs and stuff. So awesome. Thanks, Megan. Anything else, Chad?
I think we covered a lot more than I thought we were going to cover, honestly. I appreciate that, Joel.
Thank you, Joel, for your time and your drive down here.
Yeah, thank you guys.
It was awesome having you. A lot of great conversation. And Megan, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Chad, you're stuck with me. So.
I am always stuck with you. Like I said, I want to thank Catcher or Kruger. I want to thank Kruger about getting some of this stuff put together, because about 3 weeks ago, it's like, we got to get this going and start working on it. And so he kind of helped me with some of the outline stuff, because he's like, I can't be there, but let's spitball and we'll put something together. And so I want to thank him for that.
It's nice you brought Matt up, because you can see Matt on our other podcast talking about Nexus LP and energy.
Yeah.
So go watch that one after you're done with this one.
Yep.
Or
we got too many Matts.
Or rewatch this.
I got too many Matts
one of the
in
other.
my phone book.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate the time. We'll look forward to the field day on the 13th.
Definitely.
Yep.
Follow us on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, I guess is what it's called now. Pretty much Nexus Cooperative or Nexus Co-op on all three of them. And then YouTube, Nexus Cooperative, where you're watching this lovely podcast. Thank you for waving, Chad.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys wanted to wave. If you don't have any access to any of that, nexus.coop/podcast is our website.